Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this evening for Cultivating a Diverse Workforce, DE&I Practices at Early Stage Companies. My name is Ashley Bonanno Curley, and I'm the Director of Alumni Affinity Programs with the USC Alumni Association, and I have the joy of working with the Entrepreneurs Network, who helped to curate this program this evening. As you all know, this webinar is being recorded, so we will be sharing this recording with folks later post-event. And we encourage you to type your questions in the Q&A box throughout the discussion. This is really an interactive discussion. If anything comes up, please feel free to, again, use that Q&A box. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our moderator for the evening, Dr. Ed Hasan. Dr. Ed Hasan is the CEO of Kaizen Human Capital, an evidence-based organizational development, leadership coaching, and HR consulting firm in the Washington, D.C. and Los Angeles metro areas. He also serves as an adjunct professor at Georgetown University, and you can hear my wonderful coworkers, so I apologize. At Georgetown, Dr. Hasan teaches in the Master's in HR Management program, and he also received his Doctor of Education in Organizational Change and Leadership from the University of Southern California. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to Ed.
Thank you, Ashley. Thank you, everyone. I'm not sure if everybody can chat really quick. I just want to see how many folks we have here. Can you give us some encouragement here and just put in fight on, maybe in the chat box? Let's see how many people we can get here. And if nobody else does it, Ashley will do it for us, I'm hoping. There we go. We got a lot of fight ons. I appreciate that. Awesome. I appreciate that. So entrepreneurs strive to achieve a variety of goals, whether it be creating value, engendering change, for example, social change, or achieving financial success. However, three pillars are needed to achieve these goals: diversity, equity, and inclusion. And unfortunately, these three pillars are sometimes forgotten or ignored. And this is despite a study by Deloitte that found companies with inclusive workplace cultures are 2 times as likely to meet or exceed financial targets, 3 times as likely to be high performing, and 8 times as likely to achieve better business outcomes. Now imagine if we as entrepreneurs made diversity, equity, and inclusion not just a component of our business strategy, but the foundation of our business strategy. Fortunately, we are joined by our alumni panelists who will help that imagination become a reality. Bridgette Austin is a retired U.S. Navy combat veteran and the CEO of B. Austin Consulting, a training and development company specializing in professional services for veterans and service members transitioning from active military service to civilian. The primary goal of BAC is to deliver over-the-top quality to its clients while providing career opportunities to military family members, empowering them to sustain relevance in their respective fields, and to adapt learning and organizational development skills to meet the needs of its clients. Bridgette earned her Master of Business for Veterans from the University of Southern California, Marshall School of Business, and currently resides in San Diego. Robert Suzuki is a co-founder and chief people officer of Eureka Restaurant Group, leading HR, learning and development, legal, insurance, and risk management. In his role as CPO, he ensures alignment of Eureka's people strategy to its business strategy, while ensuring the company realizes its ideal culture, feeling good and feeling alive. Mr. Suzuki holds a bachelor's degree in philosophy from USC, where he was a global fellow. He also served on the USC Asian Pacific Scholarship Committee for 9 years and has been a USC mentor for 2 years. So without further ado, Bridgette and Robert, I'm going to ask the first question, if I may. So I read a study recently that stated 70% of startup founders, or 70% of startup founders think diversity is important, but only 10% of startup founders will actually implement a diversity program. Why do you think that is?
Well, you alluded to it a little bit, Ed, when you spoke of the importance of diversity. However, it's not understood that the importance of diversity is also the part of the success of the organization. Now, when you're dealing with a startup, we have multiple options or multiple opportunities and to scale in our business. One of those things that we seem to miss is including diversity, inclusion, and the research involved, which means when you're doing your discovery, you need to include discovery when you're talking to other employers, other businesses that have done it right, that have been successful at bringing that on board and are maintaining the program. So when when you're building your business model, when you're building your business plan, that needs to be implemented as you're structuring and creating the foundation for diversity and inclusion in your organization as policies and procedures going forward to implement with your mission, your vision, and your values of that organization.
Yeah, I can kind of chime in based on personal experience, thinking back to the early days of our business. I know I wasn't, always doing my best in terms of DE&I, and quite frankly, it's because you're just trying to keep your head above water, right? Like there's so many things as an entrepreneur starting a business that you have to get done just to turn on the lights tomorrow, make that sale, whatever it may be. And I think that's totally normal, and you can't criticize yourself because of that. You just have to keep in mind, I think, that DE&I has to rise to the very top of your agenda because it's tied directly to culture, and really you're laying the groundwork for your future. And if you have a strong culture, you mentioned the stats, twice as likely to meet financial targets, 8 times better business outcomes. Like if you lay the groundwork with DE&I now, it's going to be more important than anything you have on your checklist that you think you have to get done that day. And it's that simple. It doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be complicated. You can start really simply with small things and work your way up.
So could either of you just speak to any challenges or struggles that you had early on when starting your businesses? Any ID&E specific challenges that maybe you faced yourselves?
Oh, absolutely. Robert, you hit a strong point in terms of the struggles personally. And in that regard, when I was looking at my discovery and trying to figure out what companies I wanted to pitch to or what companies I wanted to speak with and starting my company, I looked at the CEO's list and this executive leadership team and the about page. And oftentimes all I saw was older white males. And I felt intimidated. And I pulled back like, are they going to want to hire me? Are they even going to want to retain my services? Because they don't look like me. And it was like rarely did I see a multiracial organization in the executive as part of the executive leadership team. So one of my biggest challenges was taking that on board and actually using that as an opportunity to build on my discovery and find out why they're not a diverse workforce, what their challenges were. And it actually built onto it and created a conversation in the process. So it's an ongoing challenge. And a lot of times when I'm dealing with clients and potentially working with clients, the first thing I do is I look at their about page and I look at their executive leadership team. And I think, this is going to be a challenge because I'm not seeing any diversity right off the bat. So that's probably at the forefront from my experience.
Yeah, it's a similar thing came to my mind. For us, I think at the beginning, the challenge was hiring, and both for new positions or replacing people in the organization. Again, you have so much going on and so few resources. When you have an open position, you're going to try to promote somebody that's already in the organization, but maybe they're not as diverse as others. Or you put a rec out and you try to hire someone from the outside, and perhaps you're not getting enough candidates that are representing a diverse group of people. So it's reminding and really demanding or mandating that you get more applicants, more diverse applicants, and then also that you, for promotion, you're considering a wider range of people, not just the most obvious choice to promote or to transfer, but really take the time and make sure you're making good hiring decisions that reflect your goals around DE&I. And then also, I think buy-in in the very early stages. I started with the business with partners, and it wasn't DE&I wasn't necessarily a shared, top priority. But as we grew, and luckily we attracted people from large organizations, publicly traded organizations, it became actually easier as we grew to get buy-in from our senior team, because if you're coming from a large organization, DE&I is just standard. You have to have it at that higher level. So buy-in became easier as we attracted more people from large organizations.
So we do have a question in the Q&A, but before I get to that question, let's go to something basic. What does diversity mean to the two of you all?
Thank you for asking that, Ed, because my next response, or something I wanted to mention, is in starting a company, building the company, first, I have to understand what the definition of diversity and inclusion is before I can actually implement it in any type of policy or procedure. So the question is almost loaded, because it means it means a lot. I mean, it's not necessarily, looking at me, you think diversity and inclusion, but when I started, I was far from understanding all the various levels of diversity and inclusion, because it deals with the silent disability, the unseen disability. It deals with the pronouns. All those things that fall into diversity and inclusion is a part of building a successful organization. And to answer your question, it is the building block to bringing ideas on from all different perspectives and being successful at having a conversation and being able to listen and learn to another person's cultural values, cultural interests, and what they're bringing to the table, and understand it and celebrate it.
Yeah, I look at it maybe in two ways. First, from the data perspective, like you have to look at the data. That's your gender, race, age, all those. But I also think there's a little more nuance when you talk about where people are coming from, their backgrounds and their ways of thinking. And you really have to weigh both that. You have to prove on the data side that you have a diverse data set, and then also that you have people with different ways of thinking and different perspectives, because you want that discussion at a table. You want it to be lively and informative, not just a lot of nodding heads.
Excellent. So a question from the team here. What are tangible things entrepreneurs in the early stages can do to establish DE&I practices?
I'm gonna reiterate what I kind of alluded to earlier. Something tangible is, as you may or may not know, when you're looking at the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, there's not a lot of data on diversity and inclusion. So you have to really get out there and ask those questions and understand and educate yourself so that you know how to implement what policies and what procedures you want in your organization. And you know what the differences are and how to communicate that, so that when you're bringing in a diverse workforce, each and every individual understands as soon as they walk in the organization that this company, based on mission, vision, and values, is supporting a diverse group, whether it be affinity group, and having those conversations as you're building and understanding what type of affinity groups are available, what kind of affinity groups you can legally implement into your organization, because you want to make sure that you're following legal guidelines as well. And basically putting together a strong foundation based on your education and your experience and your discovery of other organizations that have done it right.
That's great. Learn as much as you can from as many resources, right? Like digest all that information. I think there's some tactical things you can do that are fairly simple and they don't cost any money. If your startups don't necessarily have big, resources or budgets for DE&I work, but you can start with your data. Like I mentioned, make sure you are capturing the data so you can reflect back and make sure you have a diverse workforce. What does your population look like today? What are some reasonable goals? Because it may not be perfect on day one, but where do you want to be in 1 or 2 or 3 years from a demographic standpoint? And then, when you're hiring or promoting, mandate that there's a diverse group of candidates to choose from. It seems simple, but when you're moving 100 miles an hour, you don't always do it. always open job recs, always open new applications for positions. Don't just hire the person who makes the most sense, because you never know who may apply. It could be someone you never thought was interested, and there you go, you have a great candidate. Exit interviews and engagement surveys and all those methods that are easy. You can do a Survey Monkey to hear from your own team how, about their perception of DE&I in the workplace. And then on their way out in an exit interview to make sure there's no blind spots that you weren't aware of. And I think also bringing, kind of what Bridgette was saying, bringing outside ideas to your board of directors, or as an advisor, or if you have a personal mentor, if you can find people who are diverse, come from a different background than you, and have them as advisors or even on your board, I think that can be a really easy way to get good information.
So I'm going to play devil's advocate, because this is what I hear from clients all the time. It just costs too much money. I just don't have time to focus on diversity. I'm welcoming. I believe in everybody. I will interview everybody, but I just don't have the time or the money just to focus on that. What do you all say to that?
Well, and that's where there is data on that. There's case studies on that. And, one of the things I do as a workplace investigator is I deal with complaints. And so bringing it in the pocket. Okay, you talk monetarily, and the outcome or the potential outcome of not having a strong D&I program, and some of the ramifications based on data, real-time data, and bringing those numbers as part of the conversation and showing the losses or the potential losses is usually an eye-opener for most companies, particularly small companies, because we can't afford to lose that kind of money anyway. So it's probably best, or it's definitely best, to do it right the first time.
Yeah, I think it kind of goes to a high level where, like, if you don't have time for creating a good culture and providing an environment where your people are happy, then nothing else really matters. It has to be at the highest level for you. Whatever your mission statement is, we're going to be the premier producer of X. I'm certain that having a happy workforce that feels comfortable, feels supported, is in a safe and fair, equitable workplace, I'm sure that's mission critical to your business. So it has to rise to that highest level, and it doesn't have to cost anything. I mean, I think our probably most successful program we've implemented was a sponsorship program where we, a women's council, where we paired more senior women in our organization with other less experienced folks, so that they could be mentors and have phone calls and meet for coffee back when we could meet in person. And that was free, and it was really well received. I think we had about 80 members, and it didn't cost anything, just time.
Excellent, thank you. Are there any channels or different ways to approach recruitment for a startup tech company wanting to assure it is pulling from a diverse pool of talent? Tech is always challenged with searching for talent. Another loaded question, Bridgette. I see that smile. That's a tough one.
Tech, yes. I say that because a lot of companies have gone with artificial intelligence with their recruitment process, and using tech, in that way sometimes it could be beneficial, but with a small startup, it really depends on how it's utilized and, how it's programmed so that the bias piece is removed from that process. So utilizing tech and building tech with today's industry is probably promoting more of a diverse industry than I would say maybe a couple of years ago, simply because, tech is wrapped around everything we're doing, particularly in this environment, in this virtual environment. So how to utilize tech would be, I would say, virtually or, hands-on in person. Artificial intelligence is something that a lot of tech companies have thought of to utilize. And basically, again, utilizing and being cautious of bias or the implicit bias that's integrated into that system so that it's removed and it's a positive utilization for recruitment processes.
Yeah, I think I can kind of add to that. I can't speak to tech. I don't know hiring in the tech world, but you do have to look at your channels, your hiring channels, and then look at the data and the results of that. So you have to make sure that you're getting good results that are meeting your hiring objectives based on each channel, and then also demographic, because it does change based on where you are in the country. If you're hiring in a city center versus a rural area. So you need to look at the data and, it's a little back mirror, but it can help you pivot and make changes if you're not getting good results from a certain channel.
One more thing on that, Ed, the various applicant tracking systems when you're using tech. And being able to, it's not going to just figure it out on its own. You have to program it accurately so that it utilizes all the right tools to identify the right balance when you're using that type of tech. So I just wanted to add that to it.
Excellent. Thank you. One individual asked or stated, in Tuesday evening's USC DEIJ event, one of the panelists spoke of the need to break away from the usual headhunting networks. Quote unquote, the good old boy network, AKA I got you, a guy for you. Should hiring practices start from scratch, go all in-house for searches, or blend usual means with something more innovative and diverse? So I think they're looking more here, the challenge around what we call similar to me bias. How do we kind of move away from that?
Well, one of the largest tools out there is LinkedIn. You can pick and choose. Organization-wise, you have a lot of information and data that you can start from just by utilizing that one tool, particularly if you're looking for a specific type of organization, specific industry, and looking within that industry, not necessarily for someone like you, but again, going into the about page, going into the senior leadership or executive leadership team page to see what this organization is about, having coffee or having lunch with someone from that organization so that you can have a better understanding of the diversity program from somebody that's actually working in that organization. So, the good old boy or whatever network, yeah, that's always going to be there and it's a resource. But nowadays with tech and with social media, there are multiple other channels you can utilize to do your research and actually have a virtual or, soon to be in-person coffee and ask those important questions about the organization.
Yeah, I keep a LinkedIn account, subscription. I have it on my calendar twice a week to spend an hour cultivating, talent pools. I think it's a great resource. Agencies are my last resort. We hardly ever use agency recruiting firms. But the like me issue is super important. And the way we approach that, all of our hires are conducted in a hiring committee. So you have 3 or 4 to 5 people who are making a decision about a candidate. It's never one person's choice. It's not something that, the candidate gets moved forward in a progression. It's always done by committee to make sure, multiple people are getting their perspectives and have ability to share their thoughts. And we hope in theory and in practice that eliminates as much as we can the, like me hiring.
Got it. Great. Thank you. Another question here. How can you make sure that early stage DE&I efforts aren't overly burdensome, specifically time and emotional labor, to people from underrepresented groups that are in your company?
I think that's
These are tough questions. These are tough questions.
I think that's where you establish your affinity groups and you develop, leaders of those groups or similar groups, particularly with a small, diverse, group in the organization. So as far as the time and the energy, well, looking at it's a startup. So how big is your organization in the first place? So you want to start small and grow as your company grows. And as you're doing so, then you bring in the relevant issues with diversity as they as they come on. So you may have 2 or 3 individuals of 3 different races. Start with that, start small, build those groups. And that affinity group might just be one group with multi-races in it. So be creative with how you establish those groups, starting off, how you implement your policies and update those policies as you continue to grow.
Yeah, I agree. That's a perfect answer. And the only thing I'd say is remind people that anyone can participate. You don't have to fit a, diversity box to participate in a diversity group. It's open to everyone. That's the point. And we like that women's council I was mentioning. We had many men who participated and got a lot out of it. Probably, maybe in some cases even more than their peers. So open the gate and let anyone participate who wants to.
Excellent. Healthy, proactive organizations exhaust all possible HR avenues to level the playing field, to provide workforce opportunities. However, how can smaller startup companies begin to address this issue in standardized DE&I practices?
You said it in the question, Ed, standardized. Okay, so again, there are companies out there, small and large, that are doing it right. They have their benchmark, they have their best practices. So you want to model your company after those that are doing it right and tailor it to fit your company. So ask those questions, reach out. A lot of companies, if they're doing great things, they want to talk about it. They're proud of it and they want to share that information. So it's not about reinventing the wheel. It's about seeing who's doing it best and emulate that and model that structure and tailor it to your own organization.
And I don't know if this is a direct answer, but keep in mind, I think the audience here is entrepreneurs, like founders, people who are starting organizations. And keep in mind, it's sometimes lonely at the top, but whatever you advocate for and whatever you pursue is likely going to be a really important thing for everyone else in your organization. If you're, a founder, or if you're, one of the founders of a company, if it's important to you, it will be important to the organization. So choose something, and it could be small, but if it is important to you and you, work at it, it will be successful for the whole group.
Excellent. Another question is, do you think personality assessments are helpful in the recruitment process?
I think personality assessments are helpful in any process. Understanding, who you're working with, what you're dealing with, the beliefs of others broadens your mind and your perspective and your viewpoint. So while it may be time consuming, at times, the information and the data is with you. And it's data that you can go back to. I mean, often there's, the tests are redone, but the personality test that I've seen, I've submitted, I've completed, there's not a lot of change. So once you do it, you have that profile, you have that dynamic. So you know that much more about the members of your team. And so now you can use that to structure a team when you have a complex project and you see that this individual is good with complex, situations. You can assign that person to lead the team and based on that personality trait and move forward with there. If it doesn't work out, well, then you at least had something to start with in the first place.
Yeah, I think they can be helpful, but you made me have flashbacks. Like, you have to have the resources to execute it properly, because having an assessment and then not using it or using it incorrectly can be really challenging for many reasons. From a risk perspective, if someone says you aren't being fair in your hiring practices, to just becoming too burdensome. I mean, they can slow down the interview and application process, and you have to have someone on the other side of the table, the hiring manager. They have to be invested in that, to spend the time to read it and to read every single one for every single candidate. So do it, but you have to also have the resources to pull it off.
Excellent.
Very true.
You both have spoken to you've spoken about hiring a team, but what can early stage companies do about retention, or how can we focus on retention more than anything?
For early stage companies, let me clarify. Are you talking about, so you're already established and you have your employees and you're trying to retain them?
Yeah. So let's just say within the first 6 to 12 months, you have folks, startups, there's a lot of stress, a lot of pressure, a lot of external factors that they're working with. How do you ensure that there's a retention that's still in place?
I think in that stage, communication is huge, and understanding the dynamic of your team at all times. Now usually it's small companies. So having that conversation, having those meetings, regarding, whatever situation you're dealing with, whether it be, a customer or internal, having those conversations and communicating what's going on, what's happening at certain intervals, just like when you have your exit interviews. Okay, so it's not an exit interview. You're doing your employee performance review. So you're doing your performance review. You're having that conversation. What's going on? What can we do better? It's almost like having a survey. And in those first couple of years, anyway, you got a lot of questions. You want to make sure things are going right. So you have to maintain that level of communication until you have a broader understanding of your workforce, your team before it grows. And as it becomes a bigger team, now you can continue your foundation as it grows, and you have an understanding of the dynamic of the individuals that are working in your organization.
Yeah, Bridgette said it well. I was taking notes and she kind of touched on all of them already, but it is all communication. Like, as simple as making sure you have a repeating calendar with your team or the people that report into you, at least for a one-on-one once a week, half an hour once a week, time on the calendar where they know they can talk to you and you'll be available. I think anonymous surveys are always great, just to get a pulse on your people. You don't have to hire complicated software. You can get them free on SurveyMonkey or online, and that's great data. Something we've always had town hall calls. I think those are really helpful in early stages. Once a month, once a quarter, where a few people can get on and just talk about the business and what's ahead, how are the results, and then what's coming up in the next near future. It's all communication. I agree 100%.
Ed, but the biggest piece to that retention part is accountability. Okay, we can have a conversation all day, but if no one's following up with the challenges and held accountable, that's also going to be a challenge. So that's definitely part of the retention piece.
Absolutely. How have your strategies on focusing on DE&I, how has it evolved as your company matured?
Learning the new phrases. When I, starting out, it's just like, okay, it's race, creed, religion, the basics. And now it's evolving into BIPOC. Like I said, pronouns, there's the disability piece and the hidden disabilities, there's so many different levels of DEI that I didn't even know existed, particularly when you're talking about, I wrote one down, ableism. I didn't even realize ableism was something that was challenging in the workplace. So just learning more levels of diversity and being open to those levels and understanding and implementing those and making sure that my team also understands those as we build on our values, our value structure.
I don't, certainly the importance of DE&I hasn't changed throughout the years, but, when you're looking back to the start of a business, you're so lucky in a lot of ways because it's easy to make change. Change can happen really rapidly. There's less people to get on board and to bring into the barn. So as you grow, any kind of programming or any kind of initiative is just going to take more time. So really at a startup stage, it's the best time to get DE&I work started. I would say the biggest noticeable change for me is just, everything you want to enhance or everything you want to roll out as a large organization as it pertains to DEI or any other initiative just takes more time and it takes more buy-in and it takes more work. But it's equally as important as it is in the beginning.
So how do you all set DE&I goals and how do you determine what is enough?
There's never enough. Okay, it's a constantly evolving process, and taking it on as such makes it easier to implement and continue to learn about DEI and teach DEI training. It's not about a check on the block. An executive once said, we've had our training for the year. Yeah, DEI, we're good. That is the mentality that keeps the DEI cycle in trouble. And so keeping at the forefront and never saying it's enough, and having that conversation and be willing to embrace that conversation is what keeps it strong, and making it policy and updating that policy while you're updating your procedures annually or whatever periodicity you have to make sure it remains at the forefront. It's posted. The communication is active at all levels, particularly at all levels. So management, bringing it down to the senior, the supervisor, and each subordinate. Never, if you hear the word enough, I'm sorry, I'm getting carried away, because when you hear the word enough, that already says, it puts a mindset that we've had enough DEI. We know about diversity inclusion. We're good. We're trained. We don't need it anymore this year. And that's not the mindset to have.
Yeah, we start this process kind of like our normal goal setting and initiative process, but we look at the data for sure. Where are we? How did we perform in terms of making progress from last year? But then we also ask a lot of questions from our team. So whether it be in the annual engagement survey, or we have leadership summits every quarter where rising talent come in to a Zoom meeting now, but they come in and there's an opportunity for them to give feedback about the organization. And we take all that, and at the end of the year, it's really about September. We look at all that and figure out where we need to make a change in the following year. And so we really create our goals based upon the previous year's performance and the feedback from our team.
Excellent. So we talked a lot about diversity. We talked about inclusion, but how much equity did we really speak to? Can you all elaborate on what equity looks like in your workplace?
Actually, yes. Equity in our workforce, what I do is, there's not as many employees as there are independent contractors. So bringing in that equity piece is a little bit more challenging. I found it to be a little bit more challenging, simply because while we have the same independent contractors, it may be at different levels, or we may bring in a new contractor or a new team. And with that, making sure that they are included and making sure that they are welcomed to the team with their talents, their skills, and bringing on their talents and skills and accepting those skills as part of establishing a project plan or a project schedule, and building on that and being successful at the project and completing that project, making sure each member of the team is treated equally and equitably.
Yeah, I think for us, you really have to make sure everyone's scorecard is true and correct, right? Like, people have to be looked at in a very fair and consistent way. And you can put simple practices into place, like, through a performance review program, where, you don't want, it's always our goal, not one person has another person's destiny in their hands. So when it comes to performance reviews, we always do, the supervisor, but then a 360. So you get your peers to provide feedback, and then your own personal feedback. So is taken into account. So from like an evaluation standpoint, I think you need to make sure that it's very fair and there's a lot of voices, similar to the hiring process. Not one person is responsible or is the decision maker for new people to enter the organization. Similarly, you want to have a lot of voices in terms of who is ready for that next promotion, who is ready to be taken to the next level. And, if you have more people and more voices in that process, it's going to be more fair and more equitable to the group.
Yeah, so the challenge with equity is oftentimes individuals may not, just separating equality from equity a little bit here, we may have to give individuals in the workplace maybe that extra resource, that extra help, that extra step up, if you will, to make sure that they have a chance to really be successful. Have you all ever experienced that working with your employees? If so, how does that work out for you?
A great example is, like I said, bringing in independent contractors. You have to make sure that your team is cohesive. And sometimes that's not always the case. So some of the individuals may not be as skilled in one of the projects as another member. And that's where the mentorship piece comes in. And that's where you bring them in and you put them up, you make them part of a team that is a strong team so that they can learn from that individual, from that team. And in the next project or the next opportunity, give them the ability to show what they've learned and encourage them to step out and show what they've learned and, give them the opportunity to shine, per se, based on the skills they've learned by putting them in an effective team. So as contractors versus employees, where you have a different structure, it's been kind of important in my experience to leverage each contractor, leverage each member of the team so that they all feel like they are strong, they are welcome, and that they belong there. Make them feel like they belong there. And pull them aside and make sure and reevaluate that and reanalyze and have that conversation in terms of how are you feeling? How's it going? Because just because they're coming to work, just because they're coming to and contributing to the project doesn't mean they're comfortable at the work they're doing. So making sure that it's clear that we understand you're struggling, but we're here to help you. We're here to support you and make you grow.
Yeah, this is a funny area because like when we're talking about this with newer managers or people who are maybe unfamiliar with it, I say you can be unfair to your people. Like you can focus more energy on someone that needs it because you need them to succeed and grow. And that's fine. If we have someone that's tracking towards a certain position because we want that, we need that diversity in that restaurant, or if we need that person to, get that promotion, we'll invest more into them. And that may be unfair or not equal because not everyone is getting that same amount of training or one-on-one time with a specialist, but it will at the end make our company more diverse, more equitable. So it's okay to be unfair in terms of providing extra support and guidance and training to make sure you're meeting your DE&I goals. So
as we all know, every one of us has implicit or unconscious bias, and entrepreneurs are no different. We all have our own biases. How do you navigate those biases or keep them in check?
Love that question. Again, when you're starting up a business, understanding our own biases is probably one of the most important things we can start with, and being educated on those biases and approaching those real time and being authentic about it. So once we have those biases understood in our own selves and have that conversation, have that difficult conversation, then we can move forward with putting it all on the table and implementing it and adding it to, if you will, like a list, a to-do list. So when you're doing your own biases, and you're building up your business plan, you're creating your value structure, your value chain, your own biases is a big part of that value chain, because what your beliefs are and understanding those beliefs is what's going to drive you to ask those hard questions when you're doing your discovery and setting up your policies and your procedures without those biases. So it's really important to understand your own in order to be able to build on those and develop a structure and build your foundation and your policies and procedures.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And also, I think something that helps just practically, make sure you have a good scorecard. So when you're making decisions, especially around people, make sure there's a good scorecard that evaluates everyone's performance, what they've achieved, their objectives. And data is non-emotional. So if you have a good scorecard, that can help. And then, like I said in the previous question, having multiple people contribute to a decision about a promotion or a hire, and along with a good culture, hopefully that should help with it.
Excellent. So genuine DE&I commitment and implementation is an ideal, which is easier said than done. Oftentimes, internal resistance and pushbacks realistically happen within the workforce. So how do you address this issue and move it forward to become an achievable goal for the organization?
Once again, it goes back to communication. If you have an open forum and honest and open communication with your team, then looking at this pictorial, explaining, okay, Mr. Purple, if you will, is having some challenges. He's struggling. We're going to have to help him out a little bit. So while we're all on this level, or on a certain level, we're going to help him and take him a couple of levels up and support him in that process and make sure he's as successful as the rest of the team. And you know what? More importantly, does anybody have any issues with that? Because if you have an open line of communication, then no one's going to have a problem discussing those issues. Yeah, I have an issue with it. Okay, so let's talk about it. And that's going to happen. There's going to be challenges where, like Robert said, somebody's going to be treated better, or somebody's going to get more attention, and that just happens to be the case. However, if they're a strong worker, or if they're dedicated or committed, then they're going to turn out in the end, or in the long run, to be probably one of the best members of the team that you have. So encouraging that support throughout and communicating that and making sure that all the challenges and all the angst have been addressed is part of that process.
I think you have to tie it to your mission. Like, it has to be inspirational. So at the highest level, like, demonstrate that DE&I in your organization is critical to your company realizing its why, its mission, its objectives at the highest level. And you can do that through the data. Like you mentioned at the start of the call, diverse companies are going to be way more successful than not. But luckily for us, our mission, our why is feeling good, feeling alive, making people feel good, feel alive. So it's very easy to demonstrate, well, in order for our people to feel good and feel alive, they have to be treated equally, equity. We have to have a diverse workforce because all the reasons we know. So if you can tie it to your mission, your why, you should have smooth sailing.
How can you address companies on contract that have little to no diversity on their team? How do you open the conversation with them?
On contract?
Yeah, I'm assuming if you're on a specific, if you're a contractor, perhaps a government contractor, for example, and there's limited diversity, how do you get the conversation going either with your own employer or maybe the contracting agency as well? We'll go both ways.
That's, I think I just dealt with that. Basically, the contract has to be read. Okay, once you read the contract, you go over the contract details, and you're looking at your team, depending on who the vendor is, who the contractor is, et cetera. You build your own team, and if there's a problem or a challenge with building that team, then that's where you have the contract negotiation. So basically, when you're dealing with contract negotiation, if equity and DEI is important, and it is, then that should be part of the conversation and part of the negotiation as an important factor in completing the contract. And if it's not an important factor, then that needs to be readdressed accordingly. But that's part of contract negotiation if you actually understand who all are involved in the contract in the first place.
The good thing about contracts, they usually come up every year for expiration and renewal. So you have an opportunity to have that conversation once a year, every 3 years, whatever it is. If you let them know that's important to you, a good vendor or a good provider is going to make it happen, I would think. Otherwise, there's someone better out there probably.
Absolutely.
So can you share how DE&I has actually been a business advantage for you? Whether via metrics, an anecdote, whatever it may be, that it's actually created an advantage for you? And if so, how?
So Robert, I've been going first all this time.
I don't know if I have a strong, like, specific data point for that. I could say, our retention is probably best in the industry, and I think DE&I has a big part of that. You will see the results in your exit surveys. You'll see the results on your Glassdoor page. It's pretty apparent when you're doing something right, and also when you're doing something wrong. So I don't know if I have a strong data point, but you want to attract the best talent from best-in-class companies, and when you do that, it indicates that you're doing something right.
So, as a service-disabled, veteran-owned business and minority-owned business, there are some opportunities and such. However, with those opportunities, like Robert said, it's twofold. So you also have to have the credibility and the capability to match that opportunity as a minority-based business to grow. But the opportunity is there that gives you the chance to prove yourself. So as a success story, if you utilize those tools properly and you utilize your skill set and you promote your skill set, then it opens the doors for other minority groups and other minority-owned businesses. And if you don't, then the opposite will happen.
Absolutely. As it's the case with any business, if you have a partner or a co-founder, sometimes conflict will occur. What if your partner or co-founder doesn't see eye to eye with you as it pertains to ID&E, strategically, from recruitment to retention, to the whole inclusivity statement that's built in within your organization? What if there's a disconnect there? How do you navigate that?
Show the business results. I mean, they will be there. It's hard to disagree with results and data. So find the story and the data and the results. And if unless your partner doesn't like to make money and doesn't like to have successful outcomes, so.
Also it's part of, again, your mission, vision, and values. So when you partner with somebody, which is already risky, you have to be aligned. You have to make sure you're aligned with in certain areas with your values. Otherwise, there's going to be conflicts beyond the DEI piece. There's going to be conflicts, period. So having that discussion, being open-minded and communicating, and before you sign on to partner, making sure that you have, pretty equitable or equal alignment with where you want to go with your company, and then talking about the bottom line.
Bridgette, Robert, thank you so much. We do have a few minutes left, so I wanted to provide you all an opportunity to just say some final words.
Well, I'll let, since you went first every time, I'll let you finish off. That's the trade there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay, I appreciate it. It's a great conversation, and I wish I had as much information in my head now as I did 10 years ago when we started the business, because it's super important, and doing it at the beginning of the journey, the beginning of the business is the best time. There's no better time to start.
The journey gets better every year. And with DEI, like I said, this past year has been extremely challenging, and in more ways than one, but rewarding at the same time, because it opened up a lot of doors I didn't know existed. So when you're starting your company, all I can tell you is customer discovery is beyond just asking questions about the value prop and asking about your customers themselves, but ask those hard questions about DEI. Ask those questions that really, really pertain to their organization, particularly if you want to emulate that organization, or if they're a successful organization. What did you do well, and what didn't you do that I should look out for? And continue to ask those hard questions and implement in your foundation, and you're building your policies, your procedures. When you're setting the tone for your organization, you make sure that in your mission, vision, and values, DEI is always at the forefront of that conversation. Minutes, when you're holding meeting minutes, anything that deals with DEI, even if it's just a little data point, make sure that if you're having the conversation, that there's accountability at the end of that meeting so that you can follow up and follow through so that your employers know that you're serious about DEI and that you're going to take care of that organization and take care of that team. That's it.
Okay. Thank you, Bridgette. Thank you, Robert. Ashley, I'll throw it over to you.
Thank you all for participating. I think that this was a wonderful conversation. I really learned a lot. And I think, as things evolve, equity is an important part of the conversation. And I think that it was great to kind of hear your all's thoughts on how different early stage companies can factor that in, not just diversity and inclusion. So thank you for sharing your insights there. With that, I wanted to throw up this slide. So again, this program was created in conjunction with the Entrepreneurs Network, and there is some information there if you'd like to follow and stay up to date on different programs that they offer. We have Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn, so please do join us. But with that, I wanted to thank you all again for joining us. Thank you, Ed, Bridgette, and Robert for sharing so much. I cannot thank you enough. So please, again, thank you for joining us. Follow us on social media. And with that, I will send you all into the evening with a warm fight on. So fight on, thank you. And thanks for joining us.